Okay, so we're doing a deep dive on a case, and honestly, it's got everything you'd want in like a crazy thriller or something.
Yeah.
We're talking about rubber ducks, we've got
Yeah.
counterfeit cash, and like a whole murder trial all kind of mixed together. And this all started with a police report that a listener sent in. So thanks for that, by the way.
It's definitely not your typical combination of
No,
things.
not at all. So just to like set the stage here, we've got a local business and then a bunch of people who are connected to a murder trial. And they're being targeted with some really strange harassment. And so the big question we're going to be looking at today in this deep dive is like, what is actually going on here?
It definitely sounds like we're about to try and solve a pretty big mystery.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. Like the murder case itself,
Hmm.
the police report lays it all out. John O'Keefe was found dead January 29th, 2022.
Oh, wow.
And Karen Reed is currently on trial for his murder. And then we've got Colin Albert. He's a witness in the case.
Mm.
But it's really important to remember that he's not been charged with any.
Okay, so we've got a murder trial that's already happening. And is that where this whole harassment thing starts?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Things start to get a little weird on March 6th, 2024, when a bunch of counterfeit $100 bills start showing up. But these aren't your regular fake bills. They've got this stamp on them that says, Justice for BPO John O'Keefe, and then they also have the date of his death. The only thing is, they got the year wrong.
Wow, that's a pretty intense message to be putting on counterfeit money.
I know, right? And it gets even weirder. Some of the bills even have the 2 in the month, like scratched out like someone was trying to change it or something. And then along with these bills, we've got rubber ducks. And they're covered in stickers, and the stickers all say, Colin did IT.
So, like, right away, they're trying to connect this witness to the murder. It's not very subtle.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's almost funny in a way, but then again, it's also kind of scary, especially when you consider how much worse the harassment gets. Like it starts with just these ducks and fake money being left around town, but then it turns into online posts and videos. And some of them are even naming and accusing specific people.
So they're trying to get the story out there for everyone to see. But why Colin Albert specifically? Why focus on him?
That's where our main suspect comes in, Richard Shiver Jr.
Hmm.
The police were able to trace the ducks and the stickers back to him through like purchase orders and stuff. And when they searched his truck, guess what they found?
I'm going to guess more ducks.
You got it. They found more ducks and also a package that was full of information about how to make counterfeit money. And they even found digital stuff that links him to online harassment. He wasn't exactly trying to hide what he was doing.
So he was literally researching how to make counterfeit money, and we already know that he was buying those ducks and stickers. It seems like it's pretty obvious that he's involved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And this wasn't just random. The police report shows that they were targeting very specific things. They hit businesses and houses of people that are involved in the trial, even some of the victims' family members.
So it sounds like they weren't just trying to spread a message. They were trying to scare specific people who were connected to the case.
Exactly. And one place really stands out. It's called D&E Pizza and Subs. And it's owned by the family of Karen Reed, who's the woman who's being accused of the murder.
So they're going after the family of the person who's on trial. That makes this whole thing even more personal. What do we know about this Schiffer guy? What's his deal?
Well, he's the president and owner of Canton Fence Co. But other than that, the police report and even things he said himself paint a pretty messed up picture. Schiffer is like completely convinced that Colin Albert is the real killer. And he's been on what he calls this campaign since February to try to expose him. He even started spreading lies about a guy named Aiden Kearney who has nothing to do with this whole thing.
It seems like he's so focused on what he thinks is true that he's willing to harass people and spread fake information.
Yeah, and there's this one thing that happened that really shows what kind of person he is. On September 14th, 2024, he was caught on a live stream during a protest, and he threw a duck at someone.
Wow.
And he literally says on camera, so I started the duck campaign and the money campaign in February.
We actually admitted to it just like that.
He even bragged about how the police searched his truck and didn't find shit. And he goes on and on about how they searched his house and business and couldn't find anything. It's a pretty crazy rant. And he keeps trying to tie this Aiden Kearney guy into the case when there's no evidence at all.
That's scary. He thinks he can do whatever he wants.
And to make things even more confusing, there's this YouTube guy named Sean McDonough. He interviews retired DEA agents, and somehow he's involved in this too. Schiffer's been sending Tim ducks also.
This is definitely more than just some weird harassment thing. It makes you wonder about people trying to be vigilantes and how social media plays into all of this. And what does all this mean for the actual murder trial?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here.
This whole duck campaign, it's like something you'd see in a movie, right? Trying to influence a murder trial with rubber ducks.
But I guess that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. It's a real story with real consequences.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just a prank. So we've talked about the facts, the harassment, all those weird tactics, but what does it all actually mean? What are the bigger implications, especially for you, the listener?
Well, when you first hear about it, it seems kind of silly, right? The rubber ducks and counterfeit money. But when you really start to think about it, it shows you how easy it is for fake news to spread and how much damage can be done when people try to take the law into their own hands. It's like we're seeing a bunch of different things happening at the same time. You've got the murder trial itself, then you've got this whole vigilante thing going on, which social media just makes worse.
Yeah.
And it's so easy for someone to start attacking someone's reputation online.
Yeah, that's a good point. This Schiffer guy, he's basically decided that he's the judge, jury, and executioner. He's made up his mind that Colin Albert is guilty, even though Albert hasn't even been charged with a crime. And he's not just spreading rumors, he's harassing people, trying to make them shut up.
And that brings up a big question. Could what Schiffer's doing actually be considered a form of vigilante justice? He's literally trying to take the law into his own hands.
It's a tough question. Legally speaking, vigilante justice usually means using violence to punish someone you think is guilty. But the basic idea is the same. You're trying to punish someone outside of the legal system. And in this case, even though Schiffer isn't being violent, he's definitely trying to punish Albert without going through the courts.
Yeah, he's trying to punish Colin Albert by ruining his reputation, by making people think he did it, and maybe even by messing with the trial itself. And he's going after people who are connected to the trial, which creates this whole atmosphere of fear and intimidation.
And that's what makes this whole thing so dangerous.
Yeah.
What Schiffer is doing, whether he realizes it or not, is making people lose trust in the justice system. He's basically saying, I don't trust the courts to get it right, so I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope, especially in a case like this where emotions are already running high. People want justice for John O'Keefe. And Schiffer is taking advantage of that by feeding them a story that fits his own agenda.
And he's using all the tools of the internet to do it. Think about how fast those pictures of the ducks and the fake money spread on social media. Those accusations get stuck in people's minds, whether they're true or not.
It's like he's taking control of the story and is pushing his version of events as the only truth. And even if Colin Albert ends up being innocent, the damage is already done. The internet never forgets.
Exactly. That's the power of social media, but it's also the danger. It can be used for good, but it can also be used as a weapon, like we're seeing in this case.
So even if we agree that what Schiffer's doing is dangerous and wrong, where do we draw the line? Where does free speech end and harassment begin? How do we balance the right to have your own opinion with the need to protect people from being falsely accused and publicly shamed?
Those are the big questions, and there are no easy answers. Our legal system is constantly trying to figure this stuff out, especially now with social media, where information travels so fast.
What's really interesting to me is trying to understand what's going on in Schiffer's head. What makes someone become so obsessed and so willing to publicly accuse someone of murder without any real proof?
That's the really interesting part, and it's something to think about as you follow this case. It's the psychology of the vigilante. They often see themselves as heroes, as people who are fighting against a corrupt system.
So Schiffer thinks he's the good guy in all of this.
Exactly. He probably thinks he's doing the right thing, that he's revealing the truth that everyone else is missing. That kind of thinking can be really powerful and dangerous because it lets them justify anything they do, no matter how extreme.
And it's not just about him going after Colin Albert. He's spreading lies about Aidan Kearney, who has nothing to do with any of this. It's like he needs to create this whole conspiracy to make himself believe what he's saying.
That's a common thing. When they're shown evidence that proves them wrong, they often just make the conspiracy better to include anyone who disagrees with them. It's like a cycle of misinformation that keeps feeding itself.
It's crazy and kind of scary how someone can get so caught up in their own version of reality.
Oh.
But let's switch gears for a second and talk about how Schiffer's campaign could affect the actual murder trial. Is there a chance that he could influence the outcome?
That's a real concern. Choosing a jury is a really delicate process, and even the smallest bit of biased information can change a juror's mind. Imagine you're a potential juror in this case, and you're scrolling through social media, and you see all these ducks everywhere, these accusations against Colin Albert. It would be really hard to ignore that.
And it's not just about the jurors. Think about the witnesses, the people who might have important information about the case. Are they going to want to come forward if they're afraid of being targeted by Schiffer and his followers?
That's a good point. Witness intimidation is a serious crime, and what Schiffer is doing could make people afraid to testify. People might be scared to speak up or to help with the investigation, and that could stop justice from being served.
It's like he's created this toxic environment around the case where fear and speculation are more important than truth and evidence.
And that brings us back to the power of social media. We've seen over and over how online platforms can be used to spread fake news, to harass and intimidate people, and to make people lose faith in important institutions.
So what can we do about it? How do we protect people from this kind of online vigilantism, especially when it's connected to a real court case like this?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How do we stop this kind of thing from happening, especially when it's mixed up with a real trial?
It's a tough one. For sure, there aren't any simple answers, but I think part of it is realizing that this isn't just about Schiffer and his ducks. This case shows us that there's this bigger problem of people not trusting institutions, this feeling that justice isn't working, and this idea that they need to take things into their own hands.
So it's not just about stopping Schiffer, it's about figuring out why people are acting like this in the first place.
Exactly. We need to think about media literacy, like being able to tell what's real and what's fake online. It's about teaching people how to be smarter about the information they see online, to question things, and to realize how much damage fake news can do.
That makes sense. If people understand how they're being tricked, they're less likely to fall for it. Right. And we also need to help people understand how the legal system works. Schiffer just decided that he knew what happened and skipped over all the important parts, like due process, the idea that someone is innocent until proven guilty, and the right to a fair trial. Those are the basic rules of our justice system, and they're there for a reason.
It's like he's trying to replace a system based on evidence and the law with a system based on feelings and internet rumors. That's a really dangerous thing to do.
It is, because what happens if Schiffer is wrong? What if Colin Albert is actually innocent? By then, the damage is already done. People's reputations are ruined, and the real criminal might even get away with it.
It's like a reminder that justice isn't about being fast or going viral. It's about carefully gathering evidence, listening to both sides, and making sure things are fair. And that takes time.
It does, and even though it might feel slow, especially with how fast things move online, it's meant to protect everyone involved, not just the person who's accused.
It's about finding the truth, not just proving that you're right.
Exactly, and that's where social media gets really tricky. We have this amazing way to communicate, to share information, to connect with people all over the world, but it can also be easily used to spread lies, and we're still trying to figure out how to handle that.
So how do we find a balance between free speech, the right to say what you think, and the potential for harm when people spread misinformation and try to take justice into their own hands?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something we're going to keep struggling with as technology changes. But I think part of the answer is that social media companies need to be more open about how they work and have clear rules about what counts as harassment and fake news. And there need to be ways to hold people responsible for what they do online.
So we need a space where people can have real conversations, share information responsibly, and disagree with each other without attacking each other or spreading lies.
That's the goal. Isn't it a place where people think critically and where we can use the power of social media for good things like education and real conversations?
This has been a really interesting deep dive. It's a story that's about way more than rubber ducks and fake money. It shows us some of the big problems we're facing as a society.
I agree. It reminds us that we all have a responsibility to make the internet a better place, to demand that people be held accountable, to encourage critical thinking, and to protect our justice system.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We hope you learned something. And remember, the next time you see a rubber duck, maybe it'll remind you to think critically, to question what you see online, and to let the justice system do its job.